Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Okay, we are going live right now to the news conference, which is just beginning between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump following their historic meeting in Alaska.
It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are two flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they have fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times.
News conference underway just began.
Foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there was a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope that we'll succeed in that, in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then, that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, business-like, and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, otherwise, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I can see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, it doesn't look like they're going to take questions. We'll see. Probably not.
I would guess not.
Probably wise.
Oh, geez, I am really close. Hey, sorry, I changed my name. You can change that if you want. Is my microphone working? I completely changed my setup.
I can hear you. I think you're on your camera mic.
No, I'm on my laptop, but I changed all of my settings.
But you don't sound bad, actually.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Cool. So, yeah, I would have been really surprised if they had taken questions because Trump himself is not great at taking questions, but he at least still leads an ostensibly free world, free nation, and Putin does not. So Putin taking questions from Western journalists would be a big shocker.
So you came in right near the very beginning. I think the only thing maybe you didn't hear or weren't able to hear was when Putin was highlighting the past alliances between hang on, I've got Trump's voice playing in my head. Let me just I'm not going crazy. It's
you need to take a pill, or
yes, I know, I do now.
RFK Jr. has a brainworm, if that would help.
Oh my,
sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, Putin was highlighting past alliances between Russia and the United States, in particular during World War II. I thought it was interesting that he chose to do that. Just that my take on it was that I just found it interesting that he started there. But I'll just get your initial impression after listening to what they had to say.
Well, so Putin had some of his standard misinformation, disinformation stuff. It is interesting that this was a little bit of a middle ground. That Trump on his way there in the last day or so has said that if Putin looks like he's shining him on, then Trump's just going to walk. It looked like, from what I heard, that Putin's still shining him on, but was smarter about it, so that Trump didn't necessarily read it or get an egregious sense that Putin was just wasting his time. It sounded to me like they didn't get a ceasefire. If they had gotten something like that, it would have been announced quickly, because Ukraine's already agreed to the ceasefire as proposed by Trump, and Russia's the stick in the mud on that one. So that didn't happen. So we'll see what comes of it. Maybe they're delaying any announcement until Trump talks to NATO leaders and Zelensky. I don't know. So one of the problems with being on the podcast tonight is we're still right in the middle of it. There really isn't a conclusion to this yet. I would have been surprised if there was a conclusion, because I don't think Putin wants a conclusion. I think Putin wants to confuse the United States and put Trump in a position or a frame of mind where Trump is still unwilling to send more weapons to Ukraine. And while Trump has been, there's more Patriot batteries going there. The thing that Ukraine really needs right now is a couple hundred more Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. They got all of Australia's Abrams tanks, so they've got maybe 90 Abrams tanks, but they could use 200 or 300 more. America has 4,000 Bradleys in storage and 2,000 Abrams in storage. We could give them a couple hundred and not miss them. So it's an interesting dynamic. I think Putin has successfully stiff-armed Trump and the United States once more and kept us at a distance from Ukraine. And it's a little disappointing, but not at all surprising that Trump brought up the Russian disinformation campaign that's been active in the United States for what years? It's 11 years at this point, since 2014 at a minimum. And it was probably before that. It was probably since Putin's Munich speech in 07-08. And the fact that Trump and his base do not recognize that fact of the world is disturbing and an ongoing problem. And it was a little disappointing that came up in that press conference there. Some of that might just be Trump's standard stream of consciousness, that he thinks that the Russia interference in the election is a personal insult to him. So maybe that's just him feeling, but it was still disturbing seeing that.
Yeah, very vague, saying that they had what was the exact words? Extremely productive.
Yeah,
whatever that means.
He said that before with talks with Putin, and here we are in August. So what, 7 months later, going on 8. And there's still, nothing from Trump on any sort of viable end to this war. So another example of Trump can't keep his promises. So there's that.
Yeah. Do you think he made a mistake by not moving ahead with the sanctions that he threatened on day 10?
Yes, he did. He should have put those in place and started the meeting with those in place, because he would have started with a very strong hand. Russia's economy is not doing well. It was on like a crack cocaine high. Maybe that dates me. Is meth still the more of the drug of choice today?
Fentanyl, isn't it? Isn't everybody
maybe
talking about
fentanyl?
Yeah,
fentanyl high. Crack cocaine's very 90s. But and meth is very Breaking Bad. So even that's like 10, 15 years old. But putting the United States in the strongest possible bargaining position would have been the smarter choice. He didn't entirely fail to do that. The sanctions, the secondary sanctions and tariffs against India, they import something like 40% of Russia's oil exports. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but that's the ballpark, where it's roughly 60-40 between China and India. And those two aren't 100% of the oil. So both China and India will be roughly below 60 and 40. But those secondary sanctions hit Putin and Russia where it hurts, because that's their only source of income right now. They're not making any military gear sales before this war. That was one of their 2 main sources of income, maybe one of 3 if you include grain, but that's a distant third between the oil and weapons. And Russia's having problems, economic problems. And if Trump successfully takes oil sales away from them, then that's a big deal. He did a little bit. India is backing off purchasing oil. So we'll see where that goes. But Trump could have entered this with a stronger hand. He did some good posturing. I don't know if you saw any of those videos that I sent, but as Putin and Trump are walking from the limousines to the like a greeting stage, I guess you could call it. There was an overflight of a B-2 stealth bomber and 4 F-22 Raptors. Yep. That was a serious dominance move. I have more colorful language for that. Yeah, there's nothing in Russia's arsenal that can touch the B-2 stealth bomber or the F-22 Raptor. The closest Russia has is the Su-57 Felon, but they have maybe 20 of those if you're generous. And is that the video? Well, that's the overflight. Yeah. Further down in that article, there's a video. Go down. That's the one landing. Go down. Go down. Down. What article are you in?
Are you in the one that they're landing?
Yeah. Okay. So let me send you a different one, and while that's working, we can pull it up. Yeah, it's the right one. Let me send this to you. I used to think that multitasking was a real thing, and now I'm pretty sure people that think they multitask are kind of kidding themselves. So yeah, I just emailed that to you.
Okay.
And you have to go down a little bit. It's a Twitter video like some of these other ones. But it was a serious dominance move where the United States, when we have an aircraft that's in a testing stage where even if it's got the operational radar and it's capable of carrying weapons, but it's still in that stage. We're not quite sure if everything's going to work, and we're still working on things and trying to iron out the bugs. We have a prefix of Y, so the F-22 in that stage would be called the YF-22, considered an operational prototype. But that's the Y stage is where the Su-57 has been stuck in for 15 years. So they don't have that. And between the 4 that overflew Putin and the dozen or more that were on the tarmac that Trump made Putin drive past, where that's more F-22s just at one base in the United States than Putin has. And the Su-57 is not as good. And the F-22 design is from the 90s. So it's a 30-year-old design, and Russia still doesn't have anything that good. So just all of those factors, it was a serious dominance move. I have to give Trump some credit for that one, because just that would put Putin on a back foot. We'll see if that actually had an effect or not.
I think we have video.
And you can see Putin was more than a little bit surprised.
Yes, I did see some facial expressions at various points.
Oh, those were 4 F-35s. Those were 4 F-35s. The F-22 on the ground there. Yeah, and that was very much Trump smacking Putin in the face with American military power, because just those 5 airplanes would be able to do serious damage to Russia, and then just 5 jets. I was mistaken. Those were F-35s that were flying, not F-22s. The F-22s were on the ground. There's a different video where it was just F-22 after F-22 after F-22 that Trump made Putin drive past. Elmendorf Air Force Base is where this occurred. That's one of the main bases for F-22s. The two big ones are Elmendorf in Alaska and Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. That's not the only place, but those are the two big ones.
Okay, we have some other video of just various things that highlight what went on during today's meeting. Who do you think kind of came out ahead here? It seems like maybe this was in some respects, a win for Putin.
I think it was a win for Putin just for the fact that he got invited to the United States. He was able to set foot on American soil without harassment. And not only that, he was welcomed as an equal. And one of Putin's things is he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union, and he desperately wants Russia to be on an equal footing with the United States. It's not, unless Putin fixes exactly everything with his country, from economy to demographics to military to technology to basic freedoms like press and speech. Russia will never be the equal of the United States, but he desperately wants that. And so the optics of this, where he's shaking hands with the president of the United States as an equal, is a win for Putin, and a gross mistake by Trump. So it was a mistake for it to ever happen.
I don't know if this is harassment, but I've never seen a reaction like this from Putin before. This is, I think, just heading into the meeting when reporters had a short photo op.
Press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go. Thank you, press. Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you,
press.
Yeah, he's really not used to that.
Yeah,
because there are propaganda mouthpieces in Russia. There are no press. The journalists are either underground or fled. There are some independent Russian journalists that are not operating in Russia currently.
Now, give me your take on this. Putin got into the beast.
That doesn't surprise me. That's a Trump thing. But look what they're driving past. F-22. And he made him look at these. The other thing is that the beast, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
The beast is, so when you do have a foreign head of state traveling to the United States, if they're not the Americans, so when Air Force One travels, there's always at least one C-17 that follows Air Force One, that carries the beast and the Secret Service vehicles that accompany the beast, those big SUVs, that you have to protect the person that you're welcomed here, because it would have been the only thing worse than hosting Trump on American soil was if harm had hosting Putin. That was an unintentional slip. Hosting Putin on American soil, and the only thing worse would be for harm to have come to Putin on American soil, because that would have started a war. There would have been no going back from that. So the fact that he got in the beast, that's one of the best protected ground vehicles in the world, really. But certainly when you're talking about moving VIPs, you can get something that's more protected than that, but you'd have to really try to find it.
And was that Putin's vehicle?
I don't think so. I would be really surprised if any Russian vehicles were allowed on this base. If there were, I'd be really like to know that, because that's a big problem if they were. Because if you have a Russian vehicle that lands on the base, when you're passing on the flight line and all these other kind of places, they have inherent classification. Just to get on the flight line, you need to have security clearance, and taking pictures on the flight line will find you face down on the concrete with an M16 barrel in the back of your head. So the fact that if Russian vehicles were on the ground, they would have had cameras and all that kind of other stuff. That's a big problem.
And yeah, I'm sure Putin wasn't used to this either.
From Anchorage.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire? Mr. Putin, will you commit to not killing any more civilians?
Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Thank you, press. Let's go.
Mr. President.
Thank you, press. Let's go.
Oh, that's a wider angle shot of what we just saw.
Yeah, but with clearer audio from that one reporter saying, well,
at least
not killing any more civilians.
Well, I don't know what happened behind closed doors, but that one journalist said a lot to Putin in just several words that I would hope that the president said, but I don't know that this president would have. I know Joe Biden did, but I don't know about this president.
Some people not happy that Putin has been on U.S. soil, and
absolutely not.
Yeah, and this is a wider shot of them walking together,
right with the flyover too.
Yep.
And just so you know, the F-35 is a generation newer than the F-22. So that's 2 generations newer than anything that Russia currently flies.
Well, they put this thing together very quickly, this meeting. But they had all the trappings there, you know, the whatever you call that, the riser with the
those are standard at any military base. When you have something like a big meeting, generals talking to people, or the command is changing, we call it a change of command ceremony. Any military event that takes place on base is going to need one of those, and they're not that expensive. You can get risers like that are mobile for, low 5 figures. If they spent 10 to 15,000 on those, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Trade show backdrop, and away you go. And
it only takes. I mean, I put those mobile stages together before. It only takes an hour, maybe.
But the real question is, did they have enough time to actually prepare this to get anything truly productive out of this? They only had about a week or so to put this.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ongoing thing that I would hope that at least Secretary of State Rubio is taking care of in terms of an ongoing project. I know Rubio entered that's one of their oil facilities going up. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, that's the oil refinery that a couple of drones took out in one blow, and within a matter of seconds, that's 2% of Russia's oil refining capacity going away.
Yeah,
if that's the video I'm thinking of, the Ukraine's been hitting several of those a night, as many as 24 of those in some nights. And Ukraine's just hammering Russia's oil production. They sunk a ship in the Caspian Sea just last night that was involved in shipping weapons from Iran to Russia to use in Ukraine. So yeah, Ukraine's going after Russia pretty hard right now.
What do you make of this? Lavrov and the CCCP.
Yep. So that's one of the basic problems of having them on American soil. I know exactly where that was. Sorry. I was into that location where they're currently standing, where they walked in the front door. That's funny. Just hosting them here gives them a chance to have optics. That CCCP thing is Russian for USSR. Putin explicitly wants to reestablish the Soviet Empire. So that sweatshirt was very much on purpose and very much on point, and getting that on Western screens is part of the point. Russian television the last week or so has been giddy, shall we say. The fact that the meeting occurred in Alaska is a big deal at least inside of Russian propaganda. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between Russian propaganda and what the average Russian actually thinks. But they were like, I think Alaska should be ours. And there's been a lot of talk on Russian TV about retaking Alaska. Ironically, this made me laugh when I reminded myself of the circumstances under which President Ulysses S. Grant, the victor of our Civil War, purchased Alaska from Russia, because Russia at the time in 1867 was so, I'm sorry, that would have been, I'd have to look it up again. Sorry. Russia was so strapped for cash because they had just lost a war in Crimea, the big Crimean War. It's hard to say the Crimean War because just in the 19th century, there were 3 Crimean wars. But when people and historians say the Crimean War, that was the big one in the 1850, 1860 range.
Now, we showed this the other night. I'll bring it back up. This is the billboard that is a billboard that is up. I think this is somewhere in Russia, I think, saying Alaska is ours.
Yep, that's a thing now in Russian. I mean, the only people that are going to put stuff up on the billboards right now are government officials. That's not a private citizen thing. That's very much a Russian government thing.
Yeah, it made me wonder what they were really going to be talking about when Trump said they would be discussing possible land swaps.
Yeah, Trump wouldn't survive any sort of Alaska going to Russia thing. That's not going to fly, not even among his most loyal followers.
And he does have a lot of loyal followers in Alaska. I think that he has.
Alaska's a red state. It's been consistently red for a while.
Yes, and in addition to that, I know that there were quite a few pro-Ukrainian demonstrations.
Yes, in Anchorage. Yeah. So I had some of the polling up, but the gist of it is even under the most MAGA voters out there, the consensus by the most diehard MAGA voters, something like 51% in the poll from last week, say that Trump is, good Lord, Trump is not hard enough on Russia, that Trump needs to get tougher on Russia. And that's 51% of MAGA voters. When you talk about independents, it looks more like 80%. And when you look at people that voted against Trump, so the Dems, that's more like 99%. So overall, the American voters approve of how Trump has been handling Russia and Ukraine at about 42%. That's a little bit better than Trump's overall approval that came out today of 38%. But it's not good. So it's one of his lowest individual issue metrics.
Yeah. Putin seemed to be very on point, focused with his remarks, touched on the history that he likes to, or his version of history that he likes to tell.
Well, Trump too, his version of history with the Russia probe.
Yes. But that was the thing about, I found striking differences between the tone and the focus of what Putin and what Trump talks about. Trump's remarks seemed more like a typical campaign rhetoric.
Well, that's all Trump knows how to do.
Yeah.
Trump has always been, I mean, he pretends and he's fooled some people to think that he's a businessman. He's not. He never has been. He's always been a confidence man. And you can, I mean, con man is short for confidence man, but you can have a confidence man in a successful business operation because you need them. You need the person that's flashy, that can attract the money and can get people excited. So a confidence man is not always a con man, but that's always been Trump's role as confidence man. He built the Trump name into a brand. That's most of his value, is the licensing of the Trump name. So there's a lot of things that have Trump on the name that Trump doesn't actually own. He just licensed the use of his name. So that kind of thing is just what Trump's done his entire adult life. And he's not ever been known to be on point or focused or overly educated on any subject. He's just been good at that kind of a thing. He's also good at dodging.
I was also focusing on what Putin said about he mentioned possible Arctic cooperation, which makes me think that the choice of Alaska is also not, not an accident. It's very intentional. I get the feeling there's something more going on here. And frankly, I have to be honest, Mike, I'm a little nervous as a
Sure.
Canadian.
Well, you're an Arctic country.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we don't have you guys up
much
in
more
Alaska,
so than the U.S. Yeah.
Don't you have something like about 50 or 54,000 troops stationed right in Alaska?
Alaska is one of the major military hubs.
Yeah.
It always has been because both from World War II is when it really started. And then, of course, the Cold War, we had a lot of just basic military infrastructure that already existed.
See, and we have Canada. I think we have like something in the range of 139. And we have 4 diesel-powered submarines. I think they're about 40 years old. 2 are in for repairs. 1 is being used for training, which leaves 1 operational. And
which it's going to be spending about 6 months out of every 2 years actually sailing.
And so we're hoping to purchase new subs.
Yep. That's been in the progress for a while. You guys are looking at more icebreakers, some more escort ships. I'd have to look at what the actual designation is, frigate, destroyer, or whatever you're calling them.
But I have to confess. I mean, we're virtually undefended up there.
Well, and unfortunately, that's why Canada needs NATO and Canada needs the United States. As much as that is a little bit ugly right now with Trump as a president. And of course, some of the movements that you're dealing with in Canada, but Canada's population, you have to remember, is somewhere in between Texas and California. Mm-hmm. So you're equal to one of our states, one of our big states, but still one of 50 states. Your population's what, 40-ish million?
About 41, I think.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
So America has about 340 million ish. And so just in terms of comparison, Canada has roughly the same purchasing power and GDP per capita as the United States, roughly. I mean, they're in the same ballpark. And so you're looking at the purchasing power of one of our biggest states. So the purchasing power of Texas or California.
Yeah.
So you have to put some of that in perspective. Yes, you're a sovereign nation, but you're not a small one, but you're not a big one. So you have to put some of that in perspective. That's also one of the reasons why NATO is so important. Is a decently sized country like Canada can ally itself with the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. And when you put those 4 countries together, you got a serious population, a serious purchasing power going on. Because now you're approaching 200 million people just in those 4 nations. And then you start adding in like Norway and some of the smaller European nations. And you get to the United States is only about 45% of NATO's total population. In terms of people. And so it's the not America part of NATO is a significant number of people. It's a significant economy. And that's one of the reasons why Canada needs NATO. Canada needs the F-35. We covered that on a previous version of this. Ignore Trump, think more long-term, buy the F-35. So now, if you want to expand your Air Force, I'm not going to argue, but that would Canada has historically been. You were talking about submarines and frigates. Usually, what you were talking about submarines. Sorry, Canada has historically, in the last several decades, only been a one type of combat aircraft nation. So for a while, you were flying 100-ish older F-18 Hornets. The jets of a lot of those have been retired, but the ones that are currently flying have been highly modernized. The current Canadian, the CF-18s, it's a unique variant. The current version of the F-18 flying for Canada is actually kind of an impressive jet, but it's getting old, and you can't argue with metal fatigue. So you guys need new jets, and you need them like 10 years ago. So the F-35 is in production. It's ready to go by the F-35. So good times.
Yeah, big challenges.
Yeah.
It's second largest country in the world in terms of land mass. A lot of it in the north, so it's very cold up there. We have a lot of ground to cover and very limited resources. So big challenges.
And I don't know if you intended this, but you mentioned that you had diesel subs. Did you mean that as a diss, as in you guys didn't have a nuclear sub, or is that just
no, that's true. And I think that the government is looking at purchasing diesel subs again because of the cost.
Yeah, the United States went entirely nuclear on our submarines, but there's been some questions on that. Nuclear power has its advantages, and one of the reasons we went that direction was just in terms of how far you can sail without refueling. And we have big distances to cover. So if you have a home port in the United States, but you need to be operating off South China or, north of Russia, that's a big distance to sail. And nuclear power is kind of a big part of that. But diesel electric subs, especially with the new air independent propulsion technology, can be very, very, very effective. And they're in some ways, if you build them right, can be quieter than the American nuclear subs. And I don't say that lightly, but if you do it right, you guys can get some very, very good subs without going nuclear.
Well, I took note of him saying, you've had all these famous faces. I see you, like, for him again.
Did Trump do a Hollywood lineup? I didn't quite catch what was going on there.
Yeah, he was pointing, I think probably, I don't know who was there, but
Sylvester Stallone's been one of the big ones lately. And Putin's had can I say Putin?
Well, I don't think that happened. I don't think he brought celebrities to Alaska. I think he was just pointing to like Lavrov and some of the other prominent diplomats there, saying, "Oh, I've seen you, and I see you in the media." Is what he was referring to. Right. But even there, he's turning it into sort of a reality TV show.
That's what Trump knows.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why he's a crappy president. So the Arctic thing, sorry, I meant to actually get you an answer on that. And so I'm going to circle back to it. We got off on a tangent. So the Arctic thing, I'm really curious as to what the actual details are, but especially naval operations in the Arctic Sea are a big deal. Russia's been claiming a couple of things. They've got some islands up there that they operate from. And then with the sea ice is going away, especially in the North Pole, you're going to be able to use, that's an entire ocean that's going to open up year round. Some of it's going to be navigable year round now, which was not the case 20 years ago. That I think is what they're talking about. And when you have something like that that's relatively new, there's going to be treaties. So that might have been one of those things that some of the more smart, more experienced, knowledgeable people in the State Department, probably especially, might have dangled as a carrot in front of Russia. Like, if you can do a ceasefire, maybe we can work on the Arctic cooperation in terms of how do naval vessels treat each other on the open sea, that kind of stuff. I don't know if they were talking about oil exploration, because without the sea ice, that opens up new territory for oil platforms, drilling platforms for oil. It could be any number of things, but that could have been one of the carrots.
Well, just shipping lanes alone, right? So that could have been one of the negotiating, or one of the cards that Trump thought that he might play up there today.
Yeah. And it was worth trying. I don't know how big of a card is, but the fact that Putin put it out there is interesting. So we'll see how that plays out. I have some possibilities, but without knowing what happened in that 3-hour meeting, without more, because that press conference was not overly detailed. But
No, it
I
wasn't.
think that's the direction that he was talking about.
So I guess now we have to see if there will be a follow-up meeting. I'd heard some references made going into this meeting might be followed up with a meeting, a trilateral meeting, including Zelensky, but we didn't hear anything about that here. So what do you think?
We'll see what happened. One of the parts with Russia's talking points, and this was part of the disturbing part of allowing Putin on American soil to spread his disinformation, was part of Russia's requirements for the end of this war is the Constitution and the government currently led by Zelensky have to go away. They want Zelensky gone. They basically want to set up a puppet leader like they had prior to 2014 and like who they have in Belarus. And that's one of their points. It's essentially achieving a satellite nation without the victory on the ground. So this is part of his attempt to achieve a victory without actually achieving victory.
Which is why he refers to it again as a brotherly nation, although it doesn't seem like he's being very brotherly.
Yeah. Well, unless you have a really awful family.
In fact, I saw there was an editorial in one of the Russian media outlets 2 days ago saying that the end goal should be to kill the remaining Ukrainians.
Yeah, and that's pretty common. That's been pretty common for more than 3 years at this point. At least I'm more knowledgeable what their propaganda said since 2022 than I am between 2008 and 2022. The attempted genocide or ethnic cleansing or whatever name you want to put on that is real, and it's one of their points.
See, and I think there's, as a Canadian sitting up here, I feel like I'm looking at a divided USA, almost like there are two Americas. And I've just in the last few days come to this other perspective that I think people are looking at this relationship between Trump and Putin through a distorted lens. And my take on this, and give me your feedback.
Okay.
It's not that
I have opinion, and you know what they say about people's opinions.
Yes. But it just seems like everyone is sort of viewing Trump as Ukraine's ally. And I think that was probably more the case with Biden. But with Trump, people have to stop thinking of it in those terms. He's not Ukraine's ally. He doesn't really represent Ukraine. He represents the United States. And what I'm seeing is these two guys are sort of like business associates, or I want to say gangsters, hanging out, making a deal. That's why I said they're talking about a land swap. My guess is behind closed doors today, they weren't just talking about Ukraine. It's almost like we've seen world leaders in the past, World War I, World War II, where, they'll start talking about, I'll give you this country, you take that one. I'll swap this for that. I'll let you bring your ships through here if you give me that. I think that people have to start looking at it more like these two guys are just like business guys sitting down. That's the way Trump kind of looks at it. He's going in there to make a deal with Putin to start carving up the world. I'm going to take this, you take that. They're not taking him seriously. They don't really think of him as being the leader of a real country. He just happens to live there. We'll call him later and tell him what the terms of his lease are and let him know whether he's still allowed to live there or not. And I think if we start to look at it through that lens, it starts to make more sense, which is also why we've seen this pivot from helping Ukraine because it's the right thing to do morally to, well, we don't really want to be involved, but if you want to buy the weapons, we'll sell them to you. And at that point, it becomes very distasteful and disturbing to me. And yet when I saw what happened today, I think it makes more sense to look at it that way. What do you think?
Well, I think Trump is really on Trump's side. I think viewing it any other way is a mistake. Trump will do what's best for Trump. But this is both a blessing and a curse. And it's one of the problems with Trump being so familiar. Putin having Trump's ear is such a problem. We've discussed this before, where Trump will often make a decision based on the most recent thing that somebody was telling him rather than the best thing. So being the last person to talk to Trump is one of those things that people try and jockey for. And Putin's been doing a reasonable job of it, but Putin's been losing ground. So that's an important thing to remember. We talked about the White House where Zelensky was told that he didn't have any cards. And then, of course, he was more than a year into the planning of destroying a significant portion of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. So, among other things. So, Zelensky's been impressing Trump in several ways. And so Trump's tone, especially over the last year when Trump was on the campaign trail versus now, but definitely since January, has changed. So I think Trump calculus on what's best for Trump, he's getting more input, and I think Zelensky's been able to turn the needle, move the needle a little bit. About Putin, one of the best descriptions I've heard is every nation has a mafia, but Russia is a nation that is run by its mafia. So that's the thing to look at with Putin is that he is the strong man. It's all those cliches that you think about of a mafia boss and territory and taking things personally and all that kind of stuff. Or it's only business when it's just this really gross, disgusting, violent, lethal thing. So Putin is amoral, but Trump also he has a history of liking those kinds of people. So he's always, I think, looked up to Putin and wished that he could wield the type of complete total power that Putin does inside of Russia. He talks similar ways about North Korea. On the campaign trail, more than once, he has quoted such distinguished historic statesmen as Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, and those have all appeared in Trump's campaign speeches. So just in terms of what Trump wants and what he respects in terms of the ability to wield power, I think he wants what Putin has. So there's a weird dynamic going on. From an American point of view, it is disturbing watching the change from America being the leader of the free world, where we took a moral stance. We're trying to do the right thing. Maybe we're not doing it very well, but we're at least trying to do the right thing. I have my own criticisms of how Biden did this, but moving from that to what we have right now with Trump talking to Putin on American soil, I think is a big problem. But it is also important to remember that I think Trump was not elected for the foreign policy thing. There's a certain type of American voters, and I understand that they're like, we're tired of war. We're just tired of it. And they wanted somebody that said that they were going to put an end to wars. So there's a little bit of that in Trump's election victory, but most of it was economic, where coming out of COVID with all of that severe economic disruption, Biden managed to stick a soft landing without a recession, but the price for that we paid was inflation. And so people were really mad about inflation. And as much as I think that they're wrong, I understand, because you're trying to balance your bank accounts and your income versus your spending. And it's hard when all of the prices keep going up. And so I get it, but it's important to realize that the most important single factor that got Trump elected was the economy, not foreign policy. So his approach to this Ukraine war has never been a huge part of his support. And quite the opposite, as we've been seeing with even Republican voters, the biggest MAGA voters are like, yeah, you got to be tougher on Putin there, bud.
Yes.
So I think some of that is starting to move Trump, because going back to Trump works for Trump. He doesn't lead America. He works for Trump. That putting it in those terms, and Zelensky got smart on this, and some other people have been getting smart on this, is make it look like Trump is getting something, make it look like Trump is getting an advantage, maybe even make it look like Trump is making money off of it. And those are the reality of the situation. As distasteful as that is, if you want to actually get to the right thing, even with Trump as president, those are the approaches you have to do. And you can see Zelensky actually had pivoted on that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, Zelensky took a pretty hard line heading into this meeting.
Well, and he stated it before. The Ukrainian constitution does not allow him to give up territory. That's just a flat rule. It'd be like the United States giving up Alaska. That's not going to fly. Or if we say, yeah, we can make peace, and we're just going to give up our freedom of the press, or everybody has to be Catholic. We're going to give up freedom of religion. We're now going to be a Catholic theocracy. That's the official state religion. You have to be Catholic. These are the kind of very basic aspects of American. If you're talking about the parallel between Ukraine giving up the Luhansk, Donetsk, Crimea, and Kherson, that it's just not going to fly. It's just very basic. And so that's a non-starter.
Yeah, it didn't sound like, and again, no details, but I didn't get the impression that the Ukrainian concerns were really tabled here. Yeah, for instance, you don't even hear about the kidnapped Ukrainian children.
No, except for that reporter, that one single brave reporter.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. I've been watching this, and I did promise any number of people, and I've said it on this show before as well, where if Trump does something right, I'm going to give him some props. Like that flyover was epic. I salute you, sir. That was great. The B-2 F-35 flyover Putin's head was awesome. That was exactly, I mean, if you're going to be as stupid to have him on American soil, you might as well at least smack him in the face with American military dominance. So the one of the things that Trump did was brokering some ceasefires in the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, those kinds of areas. I don't know how familiar you are with those problems. But going back to Putin's Munich speech, part of the Soviet Empire that he tried to reestablish first was in the Caucasus, with Azerbaijan, Georgia, the nation of Georgia. Those kinds of places came before Ukraine, and they've been in conflict since, 20 years at this point. Mm-hmm. And Trump put an American economic deal on that excluded Russia. So there's a couple of ways that Trump's been kind of turning the screws on Putin that I will cheer. That I will say, yeah, that was a good choice. I wish Biden had done something like that. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. And when I say that Trump should have done more on the Russian oil, it should have been 100% tariffs. Well, there are still the 50% tariffs, the secondary tariffs. I don't know if people are being reminded of that, but Trump did a 50% secondary tariff that's going to cost India $20 billion a year. And he put a pause on the 100%, but it's still on the table. So I think Trump should have done more, but he didn't do nothing. So it's not like it was a complete giveaway.
Is this path forward viable for Ukraine with the new arrangement that seems to be rolling out, purchasing these weapons,
Yes.
both the Europe and Ukraine?
This was when Trump declared his candidacy for the president, and it was obvious that he had support, because he did. There's some crazy people in the United States. That Europe started looking like we have to Trump-proof support for Ukraine. And they've been working on this for a while now, at least since January of 24. So solid 18 months at this point. But Europe and the rest of NATO, and I know that's like an overlapping Venn diagram, but there's significant economic support for Ukraine. And so just in terms of sheer purchasing power, I think Europe can supply Ukraine with a whole bunch of stuff. Germany just opened it's still inexpensive by modern military equipment standard, but it's more of a high tech, more of a $20,000-$30,000 drone system instead of, like the $200 drones. They just opened a plant for that inside of Ukraine, among other things. There's ammunition going up. Romania just finished an ammunition plant. Part of that Azerbaijan deal that Trump did is where the United States and the rest of NATO have been sending Western equipment. Ukraine still operates a whole bunch of old Soviet equipment that operates like the artillery shell for the NATO is 155 millimeter. The old Soviet stuff is 152. Azerbaijan has a whole bunch of that old Soviet gear that they agreed to ship to Ukraine, including ammunition and equipment. So there are a whole bunch of other nations that are stepping up. This could be done better if America got back on the bandwagon. There is something going through Congress right now that's enjoying about 80% support of members of Congress, which is absurd in today's America for something to have 80% support on a big thing. And I'm not talking about something stupid like, National Dairy Goat Awareness Day, where somebody just says yes and let's get away from it, make the dairy goat farmers happy kind of a vote. This is something serious. This is hard aid to Ukraine. It's ammunition, it's fighting vehicles, it's missiles. So yeah, there is still movement inside the United States. And when you're talking about 80% votes in Congress, Trump will have a hard time ignoring that if he wants to still be on Trump's side, because something that comes out of Congress with 80% support and Trump doesn't sign it, I think even Trump can do the math on that one.
So is that a partial indication that maybe this shift in direction, having Europe and Ukraine purchase weapons, that might be addressing some of the concerns and discontent within the MAGA base?
I think it's so anytime you put something complicated in front of American voters, it's not like they're dumb, but everybody's busy. Everybody's got their own life. They got their jobs, they got their family, they've got problems with their house, they've got everything that's distracting them. And if you make them think too hard on a subject, they're going to too long, didn't read, don't care. Got my own problems. So to get something through to voters, you need something simple. And so the better route would be, America's selling weapons to Ukraine. That's fairly simple. That would help. Now, if you start talking about, Europeans can fund it, that might be a little more complicated. But it would be an even better sell to say, look, America's got all of these spare things. It costs money to store them. Because when America when we put weapon systems into storage, like we have 300 F-16s in ready to go storage, 4,000 Bradleys, 2,000 Abrams, just as for examples. That costs money to maintain, because if you want to put them in storage against future national emergency use, the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is in Arizona, that's where our boneyard is, and there's different levels of storage. And you've got all the way from it's a complete and total wreck, and maybe it could be a museum piece, maybe we're just going to make scrap metal out of it, all the way up to we've cocooned it. We've got the engine sitting on ice. Everything is protected from UV. We can get it flying in 72 hours and in combat within a week. So you've got all of those varying levels of storage. When you have those kinds of weapons in kind of a storage for a national emergency, that costs money. It means that you're going to have to inspect it at least every week. You might have to do maintenance on it. If there's a problem, you might have to restore the cocoon, or you might have to restore fluid levels. There's all sorts of things that you would have to do to make sure that it's ready to fly in 72 hours. So if you're saying, look, we're going to save money by giving Ukraine stuff that we are paying money to store, that we might never use because it was a Bradley that was built in the 1980s, we got our use out of it. Let's give it to Ukraine. So there's various ways to go about it that could satisfy the pro-Ukraine American voter, whatever their red, blue, independent, partisan persuasion would be. There's a lot you could do to satisfy them. And Trump, looking out for Trump, has been shifting because his love of Russia and Putin does not sell well with American voters, even his own. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I put on this appearance tonight was the people on the American side that were there. We did not bring Vice President J.D. Vance. We did not bring Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. We brought Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who both as a senator and now as Secretary of State has been a vocal supporter of Ukraine. And he had been a little bit of a joke in Trump's mind, going back to when Trump and Rubio were campaigning both for the primary elections to be nominated for president back in 2016. Trump was always putting down little Marco and all that kind of stuff. And Marco Rubio did not do well. He kind of folded like a cheap dishcloth in that campaign. He did not run a good campaign. But early on, when Doge was a thing, we're talking February or March of this year, in a cabinet meeting with Elon Musk, and you've got anybody that's appointed to a cabinet secretary that's running part of that huge chunk of the United States government is going to be a person that has some confidence and some ego and some pride. And Elon Musk was being, he was trampling on him. He was a bull in a china shop, putting his operatives into somebody else's, into the Department of Defense, into the Department of State. And these cabinet secretaries were not happy. So some of these cabinet meetings, when the doors shut, were really, really contentious. And one of the things is that Rubio got into a shouting match with Musk and just tore him up one side and down the other. And so that put Rubio from a joke in Trump's mind to all of a sudden Trump's like, Rubio's a fighter. I like this guy. So Rubio has been far more central in American foreign policy since that cabinet meeting. So the fact that he was at this meeting and some of the anti-Ukraine folks like J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth were not is kind of a big deal. And that flew under the radar a little bit. There's some of the pro-Ukraine folks that noticed it, but it hasn't been getting much press.
These meetings that took place in Russia involving Witkoff, did they help set the stage for any of this, or were they fairly inconsequential?
I think they undercut to a certain extent what Trump was doing. I think, this was already like 10 days ago. So much has happened since then. Mm-hmm. 10 days ago might as well be 2 years ago sometimes. But I think Witkoff surprised Trump a little bit, but given how Putin's been relatively agile and relatively successful at navigating the relationship with Trump, even though he's been losing ground, he's still pretty good at it. I think that set back Trump a little bit. Trump went from being hard to being a taco. That did not make Trump look good. So I don't know Witkoff's future at this point, but I think Witkoff has Putin's ear, and Trump likes Putin so much. We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really answer it, but hopefully that did something.
I'm just looking online as we are speaking. I see air raid sirens have gone off in Ukraine.
That's a nightly thing.
Just, even as this has been
Mhm.
unfolding live with us here.
Mhm.
So what does that tell us?
Putin's not letting up. Putin, there's a lot of the stuff that is performative show for Trump that has nothing to do. There's been some other things going on. I don't know how closely you follow it, but there's been some recent Russian advances near Pokrovsk.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, at least on the maps, have looked kind of big, but there's some questions on how solid those advances are, if that makes sense.
Well, I did see reports that they had broken through a line someplace. Yeah. How significant was that?
That's kind of a yes and no. The original reports, everybody's like, holy crap, where Ukraine's going to lose Donetsk. Like the rest of Donetsk is about to fall. Well, maybe it wasn't necessarily. So Russia, the last 6 months especially, has been doing some battlefield theater where they send people to put a Russian flag on top of a building, even though those Russian soldiers are going to die. That's their mission, basically, is to go and put a Russian flag on top of a building. It doesn't necessarily mean anything in a military sense, but it plays well on Twitter and all the other.
So they're sacrificing soldiers to put a flag on a roof.
Absolutely, 100%
for a photo op.
Yes,
on social
absolutely,
media.
100%. So these advances to the northeast of Pokrovsk have been a little bit more substantial than that. But it came back that a lot of this are Russians on motorcycles, which isn't nothing. If you have a Russian with some explosive on a motorcycle, they can cause some serious havoc if you can get them behind Ukrainian lines. But it's not like they're not really advancing in strength and in large numbers. And Ukraine deployed some of their veteran reserve troops to push them back. And the pushback has been relatively successful. But Putin was trying to do this battlefield performance art prior to this meeting to say, look, that we're advancing and we're actually winning and all that. It's not nothing, but I don't think it was the doom and gloom that we originally thought it would be, where you've got some relatively weak Russian troops going up against some hardened, well-equipped Ukrainian troops that were thrown in as reserve. I think that's going to get pushed back.
I did see other reports the day after. I saw the reports about Russia breaking through a line that Ukraine had pushed back and had captured some Russian troops.
Yeah. There's the main defensive line. It's the really hard cement structures, like the serious defensive lines that they had put up as a hard backstop behind the actual combat lines. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine had, because Russia had pushed over that line in one spot, but the defensive lines on either side, and then there was Ukrainian territory in front of those defensive lines that was still Ukrainian. Ukraine had sent troops to cut off the Russian advance right at the base. And so it might be that all Russians in that pocket are just gone now. They're going to be captives or dead. And Ukraine hasn't been working overly hard at taking captives lately, but they still do. So we'll see what that is.
And
Russia's attempt to gain ground the last 6 months have been really expensive in terms of soldiers lost. I think we'd need to talk about Russia's economy in this conversation because they were on that crack cocaine high of all the extra military spending and expanded military production. Mm-hmm. That lasted about until last October. and then Russia's economy started crashing. So Putin privately in December and then more publicly this summer ordered the various Russian government ministers to not allow Russia to go into recession. What that means is they already are there. That the Russian ministers are just not going to report it. But they've reported GDP growth of 0 or 0.1% since all of 2025, basically since last November. Their inflation had been officially over 10%, which means it was more like 15 or 16%. It's now down to like 9%, which is still just stupid. I don't know if anybody's ever lived through 9% inflation, but that's triple what we had post-COVID. That's huge. Their unemployment rate, you said you were an economist, their unemployment rate's down to like 2.1%.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a full-fledged economist. I've studied economics.
Training. Yeah, well, more than I do, but a healthy unemployment is between 3 and 5%. That's the balance between having workers available for jobs.
2%.
Yeah. And so at 2%, that means there aren't enough workers, that there are more jobs than you have workers to fill them. And some of that is inflation. Some of that is Russia's lost 1 million men in Ukraine. And that's huge. Can you think about, so right now, roughly 1 out of every 10 military aged males in Russia is in the military. And a lot of them are dead. There have been the think tanks that have been using the old formula. So Russia has about 1 million battlefield casualties. And usually the math on that is 1 killed for 3 wounded. So 25% killed, 75% wounded. That math is wrong. That is based on Western experience, and in the United States and Iraq and Afghanistan, it was more like 1 to 10 because we place such a huge emphasis on wounded evacuation and the magic hour and all that kind of stuff. The magic hour is if you get a catastrophic wound, but you can get them to medical care inside of an hour, they're more likely to survive. But Russia is making no attempt to retrieve their wounded from the battlefield. They're not making any attempt to retrieve their dead. So it's looking more like a 1-to-1, if not worse. Like a 2-to-1 is entirely within the realm of what we've been seeing on combat videos that have been put out by both sides, by Russia and Ukraine. So those 1 million total casualties are starting to look like 500,000 or even 750,000 killed, and they're just gone. And that's your prime workforce. That's going to affect the next generation. That's 1 million men that aren't going to have children. So you're 20 years down the road, Russia's still going to be paying this. So Russia's in serious hurt right now. And they don't have the support that that Ukraine does. So Russia started this meeting at an incredibly weak spot, and that kind of puts the light of Trump putting the screws on the oil exports, the business dealings in Azerbaijan, even the minerals deal in the United States inside of Ukraine. But all of these different kinds of screws, and some of these date back to the Biden administration with all the economic sanctions, they're starting to bite. And so Russia's in a world of hurt. Their economy is starting to look like revolutionary war, civil war. Putin is going to be strung up by the nearest light pole kind of economy, kind of a thing. I don't know if that's going to happen, but people need to be reminded that Russia's economy is in the toilet.
On the Ukrainian side, we saw a bit of a bump in the road with those big protests surrounding the change in the approach to dealing with corruption within Ukraine. How significant was that? And do you think Zelensky has successfully backtracked on that and put that unrest to bed?
So there's two sides. Well, there's a couple of different angles. There's more than two angles to that. One, and right up front, Ukraine is a nation where public mass protests are allowed and legal. I'm just going to put that out there. Every time the Russian disinformation propaganda lines come out that Ukraine is not a free nation, is completely untrue. Mass demonstrations inside of Ukraine in direct opposition to a government action that managed to make the government turn around was a reality inside Ukraine just in the last month. So the idea that Ukraine is not a free nation is complete BS. Now, I am still trying to untangle the Gordian knot of Ukrainian politics because it's a little more complicated than some people might think. Mm-hmm. It's not just Zelensky running it. He's got his parliament, and some of those parliamentarians are still legacy Russian stooges, even though they're elected. And so one of Zelensky's problems is he has to deal with members of his own parliament that are in the tank for Russia. The overt ones are gone, but there's still some. And this anti-corruption thing had passed through parliament, not necessarily with Zelensky's support. So he was not necessarily a huge fan of this. The other side of that is the people that were in charge of prosecuting the corruption were themselves not doing a good job of prosecuting the corruption. And there were some people that were slipping through with some big problems. Food supply for the military was a big thing. There's various angles for that, but for a historic sense, one of the things that happened in both the 2016 presidential campaign and then Trump's first impeachment related to Ukraine in 2018 when he was trying to find dirt on Biden. One of the things that came up is when Biden was vice president, Biden needed Ukraine to fire their chief prosecutor, the guy that was trying to root out government corruption. And Trump tried to make a thing out of this, like, oh, Biden got this guy fired and benefited from it. The reason why Biden wanted to get him fired, President Obama, but Biden was in charge of that that part of Obama's policy, was that the guy wasn't prosecuting corruption. They needed to get a prosecutor in there that would actually go after the corrupt officials. So, the replacement actually did investigate and prosecute the firm that had hired Hunter Biden. So, Biden didn't do himself any favors in getting that, or at least his son any favors, getting that prosecutor fired. So that's the kind of mess that Ukraine's still trying to dig itself out of. And the whole thing about Russia is a state run by a mafia. Ukraine was a state run by a mafia through 2014 when they had the revolution that overthrew the mafia, but some of those people were still prominent government officials. So Ukraine's come a long way since 2014, but that doesn't mean they've solved their corruption problem. So it's a bit more complicated than the Ukrainians wanted to get rid of their anti-corruption thing, and then it was restored. I think the new version is going to do a better job going after corruption. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the right way of dealing with it was getting rid of it the way they did in the mass protest.
Well, I know a prerequisite to joining the EU was to deal with corruption.
Yeah.
Now, the EU is saying you have to deal with this before we'll admit you mm-hmm. to the European Union. Mm-hmm. And so when this when this erupted, these protests, I wasn't sure what to make of it. I think you've clarified a bit here, but I was just wondering, how much did Russia fuel this with propaganda to get more people out into the streets? How significant was that aspect of it so that they could capitalize on it?
I don't think those mass protests, from what I see, now I might be wrong, from what I saw, those mass protests were genuine and they were very much not in Russia's best interests. Russia wants corruption inside Ukraine. Russia wants some of its own stooges to gain more power. And so Ukrainian citizens demanding a robust anti-corruption system in the Ukrainian government is not in Russia's favor. For what it's worth, I don't think any of this helps Russia.
Yeah, that's why I found it a little confusing to see the protests against what the government was doing, but still they appeared to be very, supportive of this resistance against the Russian invasion. So now it makes more sense in
Yeah.
that sense, because I was thinking this must have been something ginned up through Russian propaganda to destabilize things. But in fact, I guess what you're telling me is it was more sort of the opposite, where the people were trying to ensure that there was more stability within the government. Is that accurate?
I
in a
think
way?
Parliament misstepped in passing this and the dissolving of the anti-corruption thing. I think that was a mistake. I think the mass protests were a good thing. I think Zelensky restoring the anti-corruption is a good thing. I think he's going to, now with the mass protest, I think they strengthened his hand to put in, to force through a more robust anti-corruption system. So I think there were some missteps. I think Russia had a hand in trying to muck up the works, but I think the end product is bad news for Russia.
Give me your take on Zelensky meeting with all of these various European and even Canada's leader, Mark Carney, heading into, prior to this meeting between Trump and Putin, because he went to Germany. I think he sat in a Zoom meeting, or did he do that yet?
He was
Germany?
in Germany today.
Yeah. Okay. And then he met with, I think, Starmer. He spoke. I don't think they met face to face, but he spoke with Mark Carney, the Prime Minister in Canada. So he's kind of hitting these, key people again to sort of shore up a coalition of support. Was he effective in that way?
I think he is. I think the rest of NATO and most of European. I mean, you can. The leader of Viktor Orban in Hungary is very pro-Russian, but minus those outliers, most of Europe is very pro-Ukraine. They see this as the existential crisis. I think it is. And they were just aghast at the thought that Trump won the U.S. presidential election. And like I said, they've been working at this for 18 months to try and Trump-proof European support for Ukraine, military support for Ukraine. I think there's some smart people, including Zelensky, but not limited to Zelensky, in the European leadership. I think they can put some numbers in front of Trump that Europe and NATO have, depending on how you add up these numbers, something like 450 million people. Their economy, their collective economy is roughly equal to the United States. And that's a lot of power going on versus Russia, which is in many ways a small country. Its GDP is small. The only thing they have is people, but they're poor and they don't produce very much. They're not very productive. I think this was wise. I think it was effective. I think when Trump meets with them, if he tries to throw anything silly on the table saying, oh, Putin's going to do this, I don't think it's going to fly with these people. And I think between Zelensky and some other leaders, including the leader of Canada, I think they've been successful at changing Trump's approach, at shifting his direction.
We've seen, with regard to the EU, some new developments. Most recent, the election of Karol Nawrocki. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, as president in Poland. Of course, you still have Donald Tusk as the prime minister.
And Poland's. I've been trying to untangle Poland's politics for a while there, but one of the things that both sides in Poland agree with is they are vehemently, to their core and every breath they take, opposed to Russia. I don't care what side of the aisle you are inside of Poland, they want nothing to do with Russia. They got run over by Russia twice in 1939 and then again in 1944. They saw what Russia did when they were under the thumb of Russia's Warsaw Pact nation, a client state of Russia. They want nothing to do with Russia. I think Poland is. I think they have the strongest military currently in Europe, but they, if you don't count a navy, Poland's navy is crap. But their air force and their army are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I find it with this new president who is right wing.
But still anti-Russia.
Right. It's a very nuanced position where he's been criticizing Zelensky, but it's still pretty clear that even he is still very supportive of the resistance against the Russian aggression inside.
Well, and
Ukraine.
there's some ongoing struggles between Poland and Ukraine. Some of them were the direct result of Russia's invasion in terms of agricultural exports, but there's some discontent mainly on that side of it with the agriculture and how the Polish government's trying to protect the Polish agricultural sector versus Ukrainian exports during wartime. And then the secured border is a hassle. So there's some complications going on there. I think all of that is workable. I think, and Biden actually did a great deal to address some of that. I haven't really followed up on what Trump's done, so that's like a blank spot in my knowledge, but something that I'll look up now. But that's one of the complicating factors of that. And there's some mass resistance to Ukraine, and it's not pro-Russia, but it's in many ways protectionist Poland. And that can often come across or have some hotheads actually speak some anti-Ukraine stuff, but it's not pro-Russia. Whatever it is, it's not pro-Russia. Now, would it be fueled by Russian disinformation? Absolutely. When Russia sees a chance to cause chaos in a nation that opposes them, they're taking it. So yeah, Russia fueling some of those anti-Ukraine protests inside Poland, yeah, absolutely. But I don't think any part of Poland is pro-Russia except in small numbers. You get crazy people anywhere. It used to be you could get 20% of Americans to believe in anything. So like 20% of Americans believed in alien abductions and, cow tipping or whatever, crazy thing that you want to put down there. But so small numbers, you're going to have pro-Russia people everywhere, but Poland is one of the most vehemently anti-Russian nations on the planet.
Yes, probably the most, actually, as I sit back and look at it.
They have some competition in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Finland. So there's some serious competition there. But yeah, Poland out of those nations has by far the most powerful military.
So Lavrov wearing the CCCP sweatshirt might be
will really piss off the Poles and the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia.
But as that should send a pretty clear message to people who think that Putin and Russia are not interested in further expansion, wouldn't you think?
Oh, they're absolutely interested in further expansion. They've just been thwarted by it.
I mean, it says it all on the shirt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no ceasefire.
None that's been announced. So whether there was one and it just wasn't in that press conference, if it wasn't in that press conference, there can't have been any sort of breakthrough that Trump wants to shout to the clouds about. So there can't have been anything really hard that happened in that meeting.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think we're going to look at now? I guess we just don't know. We have to wait until tomorrow, I guess, to find out what the next step might be.
The next step
is hanging.
The next step's been evolving day to day and sometimes hour to hour. So it was only, was it yesterday or even this morning that I found out that it wasn't going to just be Putin and Trump in a room. It was going to include Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff. That was just in the last 24 hours. And then last week, Trump's announcement seemed to be very pro-Russia, and then it kept walking back and walking back and walking back. So what the end product of this is, well, it's been changing very quickly, even just in the last week. So what we get out of this I've been surprised. I was surprised Rubio was in the meeting. To me, that was an incredibly positive step that I did not expect. So we'll see where this goes. Trump's going to get some serious pushback if he tries to push some Russian talking points on the leaders of Europe.
Rubio's the guy. It seems like he's the bright light in the whole bunch.
He's the one bright spot in Trump's administration that I am aware of.
Yep.
I have a lot of negative things to say about a lot of the other people in the administration, but Rubio seems to be at least holding his own. He has to, of course, toe the line. He has to stay in Trump's good graces. How much of that is Marco Rubio and how much of that is him just trying to maintain a seat at the table, I'm unsure of. But he's definitely a strong pro-Ukraine voice in the Trump administration.
And you had mentioned this earlier, but we didn't see like Hegseth there.
Nope.
Or JD Vance.
Nope.
What does that say?
Well, they weren't included. They didn't get a seat at the table where JD Vance was in the room, and so was Pete Hegseth in the White House meeting in February, where Zelensky was so mistreated, so abused, and both of those people were gone. So I think Pete Hegseth has had a string of shall we say, crisis moments inside the Pentagon
I'm surprised he's still there.
For a kind word. Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't been fired yet. I think he maintains a strong, basically he's like an American Putin in Trump's eyes. I think he says the right things and he looks the part with his ridiculous hair and his suit and his ability to go do PT with the troops rather than, be the Secretary of Defense. But I think Trump wants to like him, but I think he's causing so many problems to the Trump's White House. Even just last week when he reposted a video of the pastor of his church. There's a church in Idaho that Hegseth attends. That was saying that women in America shouldn't be allowed to vote. We should repeal the amendment to the Constitution that granted women the right to vote. And Pete Hegseth is like, absolutely, this is what we need to be. So even things like that, they're just causing headaches because it just been stringing along. And even today, the Pentagon had to say, yes, of course, Pete Hegseth says women should have the right to vote. And they've been dealing this with at the Pentagon for a week, and this is not the problems that a Secretary of Defense should be dealing with. So, yeah, the headaches that he's causing the White House, and this is completely aside from the Signalgate BS of several months past. And that's been dribbling out too. I don't know if you saw that the information that he shared came from an email on a secure system that was clearly marked classified. And he put it on the Signal chat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good times.
Well, I feel like it's sort of today we went into it. It seemed like it could be a milestone moment, a historic day.
Good or bad. It could have gone bad.
Yeah. But at the end here now, I'm sort of like status quo.
It's just, I think it's just Putin stringing Trump along.
Yeah.
I think Trump, after talking to Putin, is going to have one thing in his head. He's going to have some strong voices in his head now with European leaders talking to him. We'll see what he says tomorrow.
And that should, like, if it is just stringing him along, that might be dangerous for Putin.
Yes.
Would you think?
Because if Putin can't get a clear win with Trump, this is part of why Putin has been losing ground with Trump, is that he can't get a clear win with Trump. And part of that is the American voters won't tolerate that. Even his rabid MAGA voters won't tolerate that. So, yeah, I don't think anything clear happened from this. I think Putin might have nudged the needle a little bit in his favor. I don't think it was anything big, though.
I'm not so sure. if
I
there's
think the harm to America was serious. The fact that Trump greeted as an equal Putin as a war criminal and the leader of a failing nation with their economy in the toilet and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think that we had a who was the British Prime Minister peace in our time? The guy right before Churchill in 1938. Chamberlain.
Yeah.
I don't think we had a Chamberlain 1938 moment. So at least we avoided that.
Speaking of, history, I don't know if you took note, but today is VJ Day. Yeah.
What day is it? August 15th. I'd have to look at that because we just passed the Nagasaki bombing and then the official surrender wasn't signed until September. So I guess it depends on where you put that date. So there was Nagasaki was either yesterday or the day before. And there was a Japan said, look, we're surrendering. But we had made such a hash of Japan in the months prior to that it was going to take some time to get it actually formalized. So there's a couple of dates that you could do. It could be that date a couple of days after Nagasaki, or it could be the actual signing of the surrender documents in Tokyo Bay on the battleship Missouri, and that didn't happen.
I'm just Googling it here. It's VJ Day, Victory Over Japan Day, commemorated on 15th of August.
Okay.
Yeah. Marks the date 1945, Japan surrendered to Allied forces. I have some video queued up from 1945 right here, actually, out of San Francisco back in the day.
There was that famous picture, but I think it was Times Square.
Yes. Yeah, I just found this archived online. They look happy.
Yeah, okay, so August 15th through September 2nd. So the 2nd of September is when the actual surrender document, that's when all those Japanese officials came aboard the battleship and MacArthur was there and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of slapping people in the face with American military might, the fleet that was anchored in Tokyo Bay included several survivors of Pearl Harbor. We had something like 4,000 American airplanes that did an overflight of the fleet and the surrender ceremony. I don't know if you can imagine 4,000 airplanes doing that, but yeah.
Wow.
Something like 200 Allied ships. I don't know if Canada had any in that fleet, but I know the Royal Navy had some, and Canada was kind of more or less operating as part of the Royal Navy still at that point. Kind of, sort of, maybe. But yeah, there were a couple of British carriers there, a couple of British battleships. There was probably 3 or 4 dozen British ships that were part of that as well. Royal Navy ships. I don't know if there was a Canadian ship. There might have been.
I don't know either. I did take note that with this footage, there was a disclaimer or a warning saying that this may depict sexual assault. And I think that's referring to the kissing that's going on.
Yeah. I don't know what to think of that because they have a point, but it's such an iconic picture. That Times Square one with the American military person that is kissing an American nurse. You know the picture I'm talking about?
I do, yes.
Yeah. It's just an amazing historic picture, but some people were trying to do the reading the body language and all that kind of stuff. I don't think I agree, but from a certain perspective, and certainly if you're talking about a sexual assault survivor,
we just watched a woman get kissed there. I don't know if they knew each other or not. I assume they did, since she hopped up on the running board of the car and took off down the road with the guy who's still in the back seat. So different times, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's hard to tell from our perspective, it's hard to put a modern lens on a historic event. That's always fraught. I think some of them have a good point to make, certainly when you're talking about modern society and the problems with sexual assault, but and as that was through history, but it can be kind of fraught putting a modern lens on historic events. I guess I'm just going to say that.
Yes. You know, the other thing, we're going to be running a movie in a little while here. It's called Reach for the Sky, 1956. It's a biography of Sir Douglas Bader, World War II pilot, who lost both legs but then continued to fly.
Oh, was he the Typhoon pilot?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That they told him he'd never fly again. He's like, no, I'm going to fly again. Watch
Yeah.
it.
Yes. And he did.
Yeah.
Indeed. So we're going to run a movie, the movie that was made in 56 about him. I also have,
and those people still exist. There's people that are like, no, I'm put me back in the fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not everybody. It is a different time, but we're also in a different world situation. So if we ever went back to a time, and I really hope we don't, I've been seeing it on the horizon if the world goes sideways again, but I really hope we don't. But if we do, who knows if that'll happen again. I mean, they certainly inside of Ukraine did, where nobody wants to fight, but when somebody invades your country, all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, put me in, send me.
Yeah, you know, as much as people, and in fact, you know what, Douglas Bader mentions that in this news interview, or what was this, Late Night with Douglas Bader, 1965.
And so just to put this date in perspective, because you think, oh, 1965, that's a long time after World War II. That was the 60s, right?
Yep.
Well, so 1965 was only 20 years after VJ Day. Right. And 20 years ago was 2005. It was already 4 years after 9/11. It was before America finally pulled its head out of its butt and did a reset in Iraq and actually did something good there. So, because we didn't do that until 2006. Yeah, so 20 years is not that long.
Yes, that's exactly right. You know, as I was born in 65, and you know, for me growing up, World War II seemed like ancient history. But as you get older, time compresses.
You start, you get a different perspective. And for the military folks, I served 22 years in uniform, and it was a real moment when I got to my 18th year in uniform, and I realized that some of the people going through basic training were not born yet when I went through basic training.
Yeah.
And so that because I still clearly remember basic training, my first day, my first night, some of the various events. And there were, so 20 years is not that long ago.
I'm gonna run this clip from this feature interview. This isn't the movie. This is an interview. I think it was done on BBC. I'm not sure, of this iconic, world famous war hero.
Which is funny because even this American knows who he is, but I'm a real World War II history nerd. So there's probably a lot of Americans that have no idea who this guy is.
Yeah, let's let a little of this roll, and then I'm gonna ask you about people who do suffer injuries, because I'm sure that you know quite a few people who have been injured in combat, and what the impact of that is, and how people overcome that.
Whom Kenneth Moore portrayed in Reach for the Sky, Group Captain Douglas Bader. That scene that we've just seen depicted one of the most crucial moments in your career, in your life. How does it compare with what really happened when you went up to fly again for the RAF?
Well, it's difficult really to criticize the scene because basically it's a jolly good scene. In actual fact, the only slight exaggeration, I think one must be permitted to say that, was that the chap who was flying with me, because the thing was dual control, I mean, he merely said, well, look, oh boy, it's all yours. But obviously it's a good thing for him to have had cramp in the hand or something, I suppose.
Can you remember your feelings at that particular time?
Yes, the feeling was interesting because I thought when I first got into an aeroplane, with the two artificial legs, that I would find a method of flying it, but it would feel different. In actual fact, the strange thing was that as soon as I put my feet on the rudder bar, and there were no brake pedals in those days, and started flying, it didn't feel any different at all.
Well, now this is one particular scene, one particular occasion. What was your general reaction to Reach for the Sky? I know, in fact, you never saw the film publicly, but I gather you did see it, or most of it, before it was released.
Yes, I did. Well, actually, it was... it's a very difficult thing to answer that, because the producer of the film, a chap called Daniel Angel, for whom I have the greatest possible regard, he was in the army in the war, and he got polio in India, fighting out there, and he's paralyzed in the waist hours, and he's a very good chap, and we had the most monumental arguments about the script and so on and things. And of course, the difficulty of looking at a film about yourself, whether it's you or me or whoever it is, and your past, is that you see, it's unreal. You see, for instance, scenes you recognize, words you recollect, and people saying things, and you recognize it all, but it's being said by strangers. Your wife is some girl you've never seen before in your life. You are depicted by Kenneth More or whoever it is, and so you can't understand it anyhow. But the whole thing is unreal. You cannot see it objectively.
Did Kenneth More, in fact, consult much with you about the part?
Kenneth More was very, very wise about this, certainly afterwards. He saw me once. We met at lunchtime when he said he'd do the part, Danny Angel and people. And then he played a round of golf with me because he wanted to see what happened on the golf course. And he never saw me again until the film had been finished. Because he said, and of course he was quite right, he said, if I live with you, a lot of people said to me, look, I suppose Kenneth More has lived with you for weeks and so on, and knows it because he's so frightfully good, he took you off so marvellously. And the answer was that Kenneth More said, well, if I am against you all the time, I shall caricature you. And he was absolutely right.
We were talking about how you felt about the film. How did people close to you, your friends and your wife?
My friends, and these are the people who matter in life, obviously. My friends said it was frightfully good, and my wife slipped off to the local one evening, several weeks after it had been shown, and she came back and said, of course, it's absolutely uncanny the way that old Kenneth More has got you. He's quite extraordinary. I don't know how he did it. Mm-hmm. Now, that's from your wife. I mean, I've been keeping the woman for 30 years odd, now, and she really must know.
The reputation which you have is surely by now is of being a kind of living legend. It's something that you have had attached to yourself and which you must be, of course, aware of. Is it something that is difficult to live with?
No, it's a difficult thing to answer that, but I can only tell you the truth on this one. I think it's jolly nice of people to want my autograph. I think it's nice of people to write to me or to want to see the film about me, and it's nice of you to want to talk to me on the television. I mean, I'm humbly jolly pleased, if I can express it that way. I'm not a bit diffident or miserable about it. I love it, but I'm humbly pleased about it. I'm not conceited about it.
Well, could we turn from the film and from the book to, as it were, the time, or one of the historic events, of course, associated with your life, the Battle of Britain, which at this time of year, of course, we celebrate the achievement of RAF pilots such as yourself. Of course, with the passing of time, the number of people actively involved is going to dwindle and become less and less. And do you think we're right to continue to give it the importance that we now do?
Well, you asked two questions in one. Let me deal with the first one. You talked about RAF pilots like myself. What I think one must emphasize, and I would know that every other RAF pilot would want me to emphasize this, is that the Battle of Britain was not won by the Royal Air Force. It was won by everyone in this country, by the people on the ground who took the bombing, the fire services and all these auxiliary services who fought the flames, who didn't give up. I mean, anybody can... It's much easier, put it that way, it's much easier to go into the battle and fight than it is to sit on the ground and take it and watch you and me doing the fighting. You see what I mean? Yeah. So don't make any mistake. This Battle of Britain is the lot of us. It's not just the Royal Air Force. Now, I've forgotten what the other thing was you asked me.
Well, the second was whether, in fact, we continue to give it the importance as the event becomes more and more part of history, as it were.
Well, eventually, of course, it'll finish up with one very old and decrepit Battle of Britain pilot sort of, doing that and sitting there by himself, at dinner and celebrating. But in actual fact, to be more serious, this is has become part of our tradition. I mean, after all, there's Trafalgar Day, there's all sorts of other days, there's the cenotaph ceremony on November the 11th, all these things which become part of history. Now, because there are people alive who took part in it, it doesn't mean that it's going to go out. I mean, as the years roll on, this will be added as it has been added to Trafalgar and all the other things which you and I read in our history books.
Do you resent the kind of picture which perhaps a younger generation seems to have of Battle of Britain pilots, of the RAF generally at that time, the kind of stiff upper lip attitude and of treating it all as a game?
Well, I don't know what the younger generation do think, because they've...
well, some of them, I think, do have this picture, and others as well.
Yes, but I know, but I mean, after all, you're a good deal younger than I am, but I mean, I remember when I was a young man, we were always taking the mickey out of the older generation, you know. I mean, after all, you can say, all right, well, I mean, the Air Force gave the impression of light-heartedness and so on. Well, this was the way one lived. You can't help it. You can't change it. The fact was that in the event it worked. I mean, I know some of the other two services that used to regard our discipline as rather peculiar sometimes.
There is also, of course, is there not, the reaction against military heroism or military achievement of any kind, which we find in teach-ins, indeed in protest songs too. How do you treat this development?
Yes, well, I think this is all part of the pattern. After all, in my day, which was many, many years before yours, I remember the Oxford Union got gigantic publicity from voting that they would not vote. They would not fight for king and country in the event of a war. Now, those very chaps who in the late 20s said that and got a lot of publicity and did all the things that these chaps are doing now were the chaps who were first volunteers for the Royal Navy and the Army and the Royal Air Force. And, you know, put out most monumental fellows like Richard Hillary, who maybe you've seen his book,
yes,
which is coming out again recently. That type of person was that type, and they're the same type now. The pattern doesn't change.
And you feel no sense of resentment at all?
Not in the very least, no. I'm all for the young. I'm all for them doing all the things they want to and saying what they want to, provided they don't irritate other people and disturb the peace.
Could I read you a quote from Paul Brickhill's book, Reach for the Sky? When he says of you, "At times I know he feels a lurking regret that his great days are over, not realizing that they will never leave him." Well, that was written in 1954 in the book. Do you still feel that sense of regret?
No, I know what Paul meant when he wrote that, and I think if you left out the "I know," I think the thing is probably right. I don't think any of us. I mean, after all, it's like a famous athlete who retires from the game. He may look at the game and say, "By Jove, I'd have to go and just have another go," you know. But I don't think he really regrets that he in fact has finished, you know, because as you get older, I mean, your memories become more important to you, and it's very agreeable to sit back and think of them, you know. I don't think one regrets it. No, I wouldn't say I regret it at all.
Well, could I put one last point to you? The way in which you've overcome your physical injuries has, of course, helped countless people in war and in peace. Do you like to think of your achievement and of the inspiration which you can give as being primarily military and patriotic, or is it something personal and private?
No, that's a two-edged question, and it's difficult to answer in one. No, what you say or what you imply is right. Of course, one is delighted that one was lucky in the war. Now, if I hadn't been lucky in the war, the disability side of it would never have been publicized. I mean, there are many other chaps who fought far better and much more effectively than I did, but the fact I hadn't got any legs caused me to get publicity. Now, that, as you say, has helped a lot of people, maybe, and I hope so, who've had similar disabilities. On the other hand, the other thing I must say is this: there are a lot of chaps like myself who've lost both their legs, who are just as good as I am and on them, in fact, probably better now, who haven't had the publicity because they didn't have the good fortune I had in the war, which gave me the publicity. So, whereas I can do it, see other blokes and help them and get written to and so on, you know, and go and visit them. A lot of these other chaps probably do it still, but you don't know their names, nor do I, because they haven't been published, you see what I mean? It's as simple as that.
Douglas Bader, thank you very much.
humble, modest, a gentleman. We need more people like him today. Unbelievable. You must know quite a number of people who have been severely injured, maybe disabled. Any comments on that, or would you like to elaborate on any of that, or take the opportunity to speak to this?
Man, he said so many interesting things.
22 victories, that guy.
Yeah.
22.
So, man, where do you even start with a guy like that? So it's, yeah, I don't even know where you start with that. So there's a picture that I saw recently. It was a meme, I guess, where it was a picture of an American, probably Air Force person that we have our cargo planes, right, that have the back door that folds down into a ramp, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the time when you fly, you can put that down if you're low enough that you can depressurize, or if the people inside the cargo bay have masks on if you're too high to breathe. You can lower that ramp, and you're flying around, you're just open to the air. And it was this American serviceman that was just dangling his feet off the edge of the ramp. He was just sitting on the very edge. The plane was obviously flying around, just dangling. And the meme was, if you ever see a veteran smiling, they're probably thinking about a memory like this. And sometimes you don't realize when you're actually in it, just what it is. So some of these pilots, some of the ground crew, some of the people on the ground, his comments on the importance of the Battle of Britain. I don't think people realized at the moment just how historic that was. The pilots probably didn't. And they probably, they were struggling. He played down the struggle that he did. I don't know how many people realize that the life of a Allied fighter pilot, because it wasn't just the Brits, there were Polish, there were even a few Americans flying in the Battle of Britain. There were entire fighter squadrons made out of Polish pilots. The average expected lifespan of a pilot in the Battle of Britain, once they took off in their airplane, during the height of it, during when the Nazis were really doing their thing and having a good time of it, the British fighter pilot's life was measured in seconds. They might have 75, once they took off, they might be expected to live another 75 seconds. I don't think people realize just how it was. And people on the ground were getting bombed, and buildings were falling on them, incendiaries and all that kind of stuff. All those pilots, I'm sure they had to cope to get through it. And so the journalist question about the jokes and the dark humor, if people looked at dark humor that military people have, and they're just like, oh my God, when they look or they hear some of the jokes that military people throw around, that's part of the life. That's part of, you go into Afghanistan, you're just like, some things you have to laugh or you're going to cry. And so a lot of it's self-defense, and man, I just don't know where to start with this guy, because there were so many people that stepped up, so many people that didn't expect to step up, but they were thrust into it. Some people might have volunteered for one reason, but then when they got into it, they did their best for an entirely different reason. And some people paid some steep prices for it. It's hard to put into words, even as a veteran, what people go through. There's wounds on the inside, wounds on the outside. I'm working myself through the veterans disability rating right now, so I'm trying to take stock of my wounds. But what these people go through is astonishing, and I had it light. I had it lucky. but even I saw some things. And just the idea that you don't want to let people down once you're in it. That's one of the things that Patton got right. That movie, Patton, the George C. Scott movie, there's the opening monologue where George C. Scott's out there going, I know you guys are going to wonder if you're worried if you're going to have any courage or if you're going to be able to actually do what you need to do when the time comes. And it was something about, when you put your hand in the goo that used to be your best friend's face, you'll know what to do. And so, so what this guy went through, and then climbed back, he got some artificial legs and then climbed back in and went through more. It's hard to put into words what these people are. And if you're not in touch, or if you're in a part of history like we are today, where so few people actually did serve, so few people actually did whatever silly phrase you want to put on it, like see the elephant or whatever silliness that a Hollywood writer might do. It's not necessarily part of our culture right now. Now, I spent 22 years, 2001 to 23, and now I'm a veteran, and so I have a lot of friends still serving and retired. I'm in that world, but before I was in that world, I wouldn't have even thought. I didn't know many people. I didn't have a concept of what this was like. The benefit that guy is still doing, because that was a great interview. That was wonderful. And part of it was if you're a veteran and you're like, you can see behind his words. And the benefit that he has towards veterans is, even today, it's like they should be playing that for American veterans that are struggling. That would be a great interview to play for him. I don't know if I quite answered your question, but it was from a veteran's perspective. But there's some people out there that are missing a face, that had to have it reconstructed. They're missing an arm, they're missing a leg, missing a part of their lung, missing a kidney. They might look fine, but they don't have some of their ribs anymore because that's where they got hit. Their brain doesn't work right now. Traumatic brain injury is a thing. And people complain sometimes about football and kids, but that's nothing. There was an Abrams tank in Iraq that had its track disabled somehow. It ran over an explosion, but the tread got off. And the tank crew, the 4-man tank crew, was inside that tank for hours. And they got nailed by like 45 RPGs that were just hammering the outside of the tank. And so those guys, they were rescued. They didn't have any outer wounds. They weren't bleeding. The tank actually was in combat the next day. They basically just had to replace a couple of panels and put on a new track. But what they went through, they're going to be dealing with for years. That moment in their life is with them forever. And so a guy like that has his attitude, his constructive attitude, is just a wonder to see. That was a great interview.
It's easy for some people to dismiss people who appear to have disabilities. Yeah, but in reality, what he showed us is what we really need to do is see the positive side and the possibilities. Right.
Well, and this was early in my career when I was. I don't want to go into what I was struggling with, but I always knew this is an American World War II hero. He was a P-51 Mustang pilot in World War II, but after the war, he became a test pilot. And he flew the Bell X-1. He was the first man to fly faster than the speed of sound. I'm talking about Chuck Yeager, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out that, he had his aw shucks, I'm calm in the face of danger, which is a very singular quality for those that can get through combat successfully, is the ability to control your fear, to get past your fear. But he, the night before his famous supersonic flight, he was out riding horses with his wife, and something he and his wife did regularly, so there wasn't anything unique about that. And he was racing with his wife and on the horses, and he got a little too close to the tree and got knocked off his horse, broke several ribs. And this was the night before his flight, and he would have been grounded if they had known. But he said, there is no way they're going to ground me with these broken ribs. I'm going to fly. And I'm trying to remember which way it went, but whatever side he was injured on, that was the side that the hatch, he had to bolt the door down. He had to lock the door shut on the rocket, and he couldn't with his broken ribs. And so he talked to another guy who worked out, like, cut off broom handles so that he could do it with his opposite arm. And he flew with broken ribs and in serious pain, and that's how he did his historic flight. And that kind of a thing, like, get over yourself, do your job. That kind of lesson is what I needed to hear when I read that story. So that kind of motivation can be important to people. And it's certainly important to people that have lost a lot, that this isn't the end. You still got your mind. You're still here. You're all here. You might be missing parts, but you're still all here. That's important. And veterans they have their own struggles, but man, they've been through it, and they can take it, and they're good people to know.
Well, Mike, with that, we'll wrap up. No ceasefire, but a historic day. I'm not sure how historic, but a milestone in the Ukrainian conflict with Russia. We are marking VJ Day here. We're going to pivot over to this movie with Douglas Bader.
I might have to watch that because I had never heard of this movie, and it sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to stick around for the watch party if you'd like. It's an hour and a half, but you probably want to sign off and go get yourself a. It's entirely up to you. I'm gonna run the film the way we always do on a Friday night. But do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up the news portion of our program tonight?
Well, I might actually go back to that interview because what he said is important. Where you've got people in opposition, you've got people protesting, you've got people that have their opinions that you might or might not agree with, but they're still your people. And when push comes to shove, they're going to step up. And I've seen this in Ukraine. It's one of the reasons why I support Ukraine is that aside from them fighting for their freedom, I see in Ukraine what the best of what America should be. Which is one of the reasons I support them. And you talk to veterans or you watch that interview with that guy and you're like, yeah, okay, he knows what it's about. So I guess it's a little bit more positive from me than I have been. But there's some good people out there, and there's some good people doing some great things. Some of them are doing hard things. Some of them are doing it against odds that you and I can't even imagine. But they're doing it. They're facing it. They're stepping up. They're finding some part of them they might not even known existed 3 years ago. And yeah, they're reaching.
And a lot of people have sacrificed a lot in Ukraine, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us, really.
His points about the people on the ground is true as well, because civilians are suffering. It's not just the Ukrainian military, it's the entire nation.
Yes. Mike Pekarek, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back, and I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but as needed, I will be calling you. And folks, stick around. I will be back with Maverick MidKnight Matinee and Reach for the Sky.
We watched the old wall crumble, we heard the freedom's call, but now it's rising higher under Putin's shadowed thrall. From Ukraine's fields to Moscow's streets, a cold divide begins to creep. A world of fear where truth is bent and promises are sold too cheap. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. All in all, we're calling Putin's fall. We don't need their blind instruction, we've seen the lies unfold. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. He speaks of glory of days long past, where all would kneel before his cast. With tanks and threats he stakes his claim, while silencing those who dare to blame. Propaganda clouds the mind, we don't need no education. Blind to the bloodshed and the strife, where Putin's dreams cut deep like knives. Can't you hear the children cry? Can't you see the tanks roll by? In Putin's world where truth is broken, we're just pawns in the lies unspoken. A wall of fear, a wall of light, where freedom fades into the night. We stand upon the edge once more as Cold War ghosts return to life. They tell us not to question, to walk in shadowed lines. But we've seen the fall, we've felt the cold, we know the weight of all their crimes. Ukraine's cries, a world denied, a broken bridge that's left behind. In Putin's quest for power's throne, they're building walls we can't condone. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. All in all, we're trapped within his thrall. We don't need their false direction, we see through the stories they've sold. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. So if we rise, if we resist, we break the walls they built like fists. For in our hearts where hope is strong, there's strength to fight against the wrong. But if we fall, if we concede, remember what the future needs. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. So if we rise, if we resist, we break the walls they've built like fists. For in our hearts where hope is strong, there's strength to fight against the wrong. But if we fall, if we concede, remember what the future needs. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall.
Go get your popcorn and your beverage. Here we go. Maverick MidKnight Matinee begins now. Okay, I'm back, and so are you. And I'm glad you're sticking around. But if you're over on YouTube, you need to sign off there and come on over to our Rumble channels or one of our other platforms. We're also running on Twitter, X, tonight with Maverick MidKnight Matinee, and a special treat indeed, as you saw during our news program. Tonight's feature presentation is Reach for the Sky, the story, the biography of Douglas Bader, pilot who lost both of his legs and continued to fly. He was a Royal Air Force ace during World War II. He overcame the devastating loss of both of his legs in a 1931 flying accident to become a formidable fighter pilot, credited with 22 confirmed aerial victories and multiple escape attempts from captivity. His courage was beyond extraordinary. And if you're a regular viewer to our program here, you know what the inspiration was behind the choice for tonight's movie. And it didn't actually come from me. It came from one of the people in our community, our online family, the Maverick family, who shall remain nameless lest this person be targeted by anybody with negativity, because this is a very positive, uplifting, inspirational story. His return to service, or returns to service and leadership, because it was multiple times that he went back, his leadership during pivotal battles like the Battle of Britain. Can you imagine climbing into the cockpit with two artificial legs and going up against, the best of the best of the best pilots from your adversarial nations? It made him a pivotal symbol of tenacity beyond the war. He became an advocate for disabled people, earning multiple awards, recognitions. He's a knighted Sir Douglas Bader. Yes, in 1956, the movie was made, and he was knighted in 1976 for his services. So we watched this film, as previously noted as well, on VJ Day, a moment to reflect on perseverance, sacrifice, and the triumph of the human spirit in wartime, and I'd say also in peacetime, or whatever these times are, the after times, after the before times, because it doesn't feel like we're in peacetime right now. We're in some sort of a strange intermediate period, it feels. But Bader's legacy reminds us that even amid adversity, determination can soar. And so this is based on Paul Brickell's best-selling 1954 biography, and the film charts Bader's journey from cadet to double amputee to RAF ace and prisoner of war, and the indomitable courage that carried him through. So let's get this movie, or shall I say, get this show on the road. But before we do that, I do need to end the broadcast over on YouTube. So again, if you are watching on YouTube, you need to come and join us over on Rumble or X platforms, or any of the other social media platforms that we're running on tonight. And we've got a pretty big audience, again, forming over on these YouTube channels, which are being nursed back to health after the full frontal assault over there by certain forces, which shall remain also unnamed. And there we go.